Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are listening to this right now, you are probably looking for something a little different today. We're not doing a typical book review.
No, definitely not.
We're not doing a gentle summary where we, skirt around the edges of polite society. Today we are picking up a scalpel.
That is exactly the right word for it. This isn't surgery to heal. It's an autopsy of a broken system.
Yeah. We are diving into a book with honestly one of the most aggressive titles we have ever covered. It's called Deconstructing Woke Brain Rot Propaganda from Satanic Communists, Feminists, Critical Marxists of all bullshit flavors. And it's by Conrad Reicher.
Quite the title.
It is a massive title. And look, before we even start unpacking this massive arsenal of a book, I need to ask you to do something. If you want this kind of unfiltered content, the kind that algorithms usually try to bury, you really need to like and subscribe to the show right now.
It's the only way we can keep doing this.
Exactly. It helps us keep the lights on and keep digging into these heavy hitters. And Reicher frames this book not as some self-help pamphlet wrapped in hugs, but as a direct counterattack. He literally calls it armor for men who are sick of being told they are broken or toxic just for existing.
Oh, right. And just a quick note for the listeners. We are going to be reporting on some highly charged political and cultural viewpoints today. We always want to make it clear that we are not taking sides or endorsing these views. We are just here to impartially break down the claims and the data that Reicher presents in the source material.
Absolutely. We're just the messengers here, but if you want the full arsenal of facts, the charts, and the data we are about to discuss, you need to go buy the ebook immediately. It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now. So let's get into it. What is the core premise here?
Well, the expert setup here is that Reicher isn't just going on a rant. He is arguing that Western institutions, we're talking schools, corporations, the media, have been entirely captured by what he calls a mind virus.
A mind virus.
Yeah. He traces this virus back to a specific blend of Marxism and radical feminism. And he claims its primary design is to erase male competence and basically deny biological reality.
It's a bold claim, but he backs it up with some wild examples. So let's get right into the infection, as he calls it. The first place he looks is the education system. And he talks about the Dunning-Kruger cult. Now, usually, when we talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, we're talking about people who are, well, too stupid to realize they're stupid.
Right, the lack of self-awareness.
But Reicher flips this completely.
He really does. He argues that we have built an educational system that actually rewards confident ignorance. The catch is, it has to align with the right ideology. It's not just that the students are ignorant, it's that the system validates that ignorance as a virtue. He calls it the replacement of intelligence with inclusive innovation.
Okay, you have to share the anecdote about the high school students. I mean, when I read this in the source material, I honestly thought it was satire.
I know, I had the same reaction. But according to the book, there was a group of high school students who conducted a science project. Their hypothesis was that photosynthesis, the actual biological process where plants turn light into energy, works better when you read pronouns to the plants.
They were reading pronouns
Sir?
to a plant.
To a fern or a leafy plant, yes. They were measuring positive vibes or something to that effect. Now, in any rigorous traditional educational system, that is a fail.
Obviously.
Plants do not care about linguistics. But according to Reicher's documentation, the teacher gave them an A+, specifically for inclusive innovation.
So the objective reality of the science, like, did the plant actually grow better, mattered way less than the ideological signaling.
That is the brain rot part of his title, and he says it gets worse. He points to the decolonizing algebra movement. He outlines how there are serious educational frameworks right now arguing that insisting on a single right answer, like 1 + 1 = 2, is a form of oppression.
Oppression.
Yes.
Please.
They argue that 1 + 1 = 3 can be a perfectly valid indigenous worldview.
Which, I mean, sounds very nice and inclusive until you try to build a bridge. Or, program a pacemaker or fly an airplane.
Exactly. Reicher calls this a direct attack on competence itself.
Yeah.
Because if there is no objective truth, there is no competence. And he argues the primary victims of this massive shift in education are boys. He literally calls schools factories for feminizing boys.
I found that entire section really disturbing. He talks about how the entire structure of the school day has shifted away from competition and movement to what he terms quiet compliance.
Think about it. Historically, boys learn through doing, through competition, through spatial engagement. They need to physically move.
Right.
But modern classrooms prioritize sitting still for 7 hours, verbalizing your emotions, passivity. And when boys don't fit that very specific mold, We don't say the system is flawed.
We pathologize the boy.
Precisely. Riker cites a statistic that boys are 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than girls.
And he has a very specific phrase for that. He calls it drugging boys into compliance.
Essentially, yes. He argues Ritalin has become a chemical leash for boys who are just acting like boys. They are being medicated simply because they are inconvenient to a feminized system. And here is the kicker he brings up, the Nordic paradox.
Oh, right, because we always hear about how amazing the Finnish education system is. It's always held up as the gold standard, like be like Finland.
Exactly. Well, Riker points out that in Finland, this highly feminized progressive curriculum has resulted in boys lagging significantly behind girls in reading. It completely contradicts the narrative that this style of education lifts everyone up. He says it's actually leaving boys behind and creating an underclass of uneducated men.
So we have schools basically breaking boys' brains, but then they grow up, they enter the workforce, and Riker says it doesn't get any better. This is where we get into segment 2, the DEI industrial complex.
This is where the historical analysis in the book really shines. Riker traces this wokeism back to the Frankfurt School and Marxism. Basically, the old Marxist class war was the workers versus the capitalists. But that didn't really stick in the West, because the standard of living was too high. People were comfortable. So the intellectuals had to repackage it.
They needed a new war.
They did. So it became a gender war. Women versus men, the oppressors versus the oppressed. And corporations swallowed this hook, line, and sinker because they found a way to monetize it. It became the diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI complex. Meritocracy is out. Identity politics is in.
There was that story in the book about the Boeing engineer that felt like a real turning point in the narrative.
The senior engineer with 22 years of clean performance. Yes. He refused to attend a workshop called Unpacking Male Privilege. He essentially told his bosses, I am here to build safe airplanes, not to deconstruct my gender. And despite 2 decades of perfect work, he was demoted.
That is the new reality Riker is describing. Competence is completely secondary to ideological submission and has a real-world cost. The book cites an MIT study claiming that companies with aggressive DEI policies actually saw a 19% drop in innovation.
Almost 20%. That is a massive hit to productivity.
It's huge.
Right.
When you prioritize identity over merit, you get less innovation. And for men trying to survive in these corporate environments, Riker describes a double bind. It's basically a trap.
It is a trap. If you act strong and decisive, you are labeled toxic. But if you try to play along and show weakness or vulnerability, you are mocked for being fragile or having white tears. You literally cannot win.
It feels like a setup. And speaking of traps, let's move to segment 3 and talk about technology. Because Riker has a whole chapter dedicated to the Chinese algorithm. He is talking about TikTok here.
He is. And he frames TikTok not just as a silly social media app, but as a literal psychological operation. He argues it's designed to rewire male brains for dopamine addiction and passivity. He compares the version of TikTok served to Chinese youth, which promotes engineering, fitness, and patriotism, to the version served to the West.
Which is, let me guess, not engineering.
It's sludge.
Yeah.
The story about the wrestling team in Texas honestly broke my heart.
That was brutal.
It was a high school wrestling team that basically collapsed because all the boys quit. And they didn't quit to study more or get jobs. They quit to become aesthetic TikTok stars.
Trading the wrestling mat for a ring light.
Riker uses that to illustrate the cultural shift from the warrior archetype to what he calls the sad boy influencer. He mentions the cottage cheese and jelly trend.
I don't even want to know what that is, but it sounds awful.
It's this weird celebration of passive, sickly behavior as a trend, eating gross food in bed while looking sad for the camera. But Riker points out it's not just about what is being promoted, it's about what is actively being suppressed. He discusses how big tech algorithms systematically suppress masculine content.
Oh, this part was wild. The Google Perspective API, I think you listeners really need to pay attention to this part because this is happening under the hood of the entire internet.
Right. They ran a test where typing, I am a proud father who protects his family, received a higher toxicity score from the AI than typing, I hate women.
Let me just make sure I heard that right. I am a proud father who protects his family is considered toxic by the algorithm.
According to the source, Riker cites, yes. It completely pathologizes the protective instinct. It treats a father protecting his family as a threat rather than a virtue. Riker argues this is the algorithm enforcing the ideology that masculine strength is inherently dangerous.
That is absurd. It's literally the biological imperative of a father.
Well, that leads us directly into the next segment, Biology Bites Back. Because Riker's core argument here is that biology is not bigotry, no matter what the algorithm says.
He goes hard on this. He talks about the hormones, the brain structure. He's arguing aggressively against the idea that gender is just a social construct.
He breaks down the differences between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and the role of testosterone. He argues these aren't social constructs. They are biological drivers that push men toward leadership, risk-taking, and protection. And when society tries to pretend those differences don't exist, reality eventually intervenes.
Like the U.S. Army Ranger School example he gives.
Exactly. When they opened it up to women under massive political pressure, 17 out of 18 female candidates dropped out. Now, Riker uses this not to mock women, but to prove a specific point. Standards are being eroded to fit a political ideology, but you cannot trick biology. The physical reality of combat doesn't care about your progressive views.
Speaking of physical reality, chapter 12 is called The Fitness Lie. This is where he talks about the cultural demonization of strength.
He paints a picture of a society that actively promotes weakness as a virtue. There's that anecdote he shares of the guy at the gym doing curls with a soy latte.
The soy latte curls. I mean, I laughed, but the context is tragic.
Because later, that same man is found to have testosterone levels of 240 nanograms per deciliter. That is incredibly low. That is the level of an 80-year-old man from 2 generations ago. Rucker connects this directly to the broader culture. We ban dodgeball in schools and replace it with beanbag toss because we are terrified of competition. We are afraid of having winners and losers.
You're training men to be docile.
And physically weak. Riker argues this is highly intentional. A weak population is simply easier to control. If you lower the testosterone, you lower the resistance.
So we have the mind virus in schools, the corporate capture with DEI, the tech tyranny with the algorithms, and the biological denial. Now let's move to segment 5 and talk about the legal system, because Riker says the battlefield isn't just cultural, it's legal.
This is where the book looks closely at Title IX and family courts. And the statistics here are stark. He compares the conviction rate in campus sexual assault hearings, which is hovering around 93%, to the conviction rate in actual criminal courts, which is 68%.
That is a terrifying discrepancy.
It heavily suggests that on a college campus, the presumption of innocence is gone. It's a tribunal system designed to convict. If you are accused, you are finished. And then you graduate and move to family court. Riker tells the story of a Texas engineer paying $14,000 a month in child support.
$14,000
per month. Riker calls it family court extortion. He argues that the legal system treats fathers as walking wallets, not parents. The state is actually incentivized to separate families because it generates massive revenue and control.
And this leads directly to what he calls the male exodus.
Chapter 14. This is a really crucial concept for the audience to grasp. We often hear in the mainstream media that men are failing or dropping out because they're lazy or they just want to play video games. Riker flips that narrative completely. He says men are rational economic actors. They are actively opting out of marriage and the workforce because the deal is bad.
If the game is rigged, why play?
Precisely. He cites a statistic that there has been a 5x increase in men not in the labor force since 1950. He argues this is essentially a strike, a silent strike against a system that treats them as disposable utilities. His question is, why work 60 hours a week to support a system that hates you and a family court that will just fleece you anyway?
So that is the diagnosis, and it's incredibly grim. But Riker doesn't just leave us in the ashes. Segment 6 is all about the reclamation.
This is the Return to the Hero chapter. He pivots to rebuilding. And he says it starts with fatherhood. Real active fatherhood. Not just sitting around sharing feelings, but what he calls attachment through challenge.
I loved the story about the Detroit boy. That really stuck with me.
Yes, the boy was on heavy medication for behavioral issues. His father finally came back into his life, but he didn't sit him down for therapy. He didn't ask, how does that make you feel? He took him fishing. They fixed bikes together. They did difficult physical things, and the boy was completely taken off his meds. Riker's point is that boys need rough play. They need to develop competence. They need a father figure who models how to be capable and dangerous in the world.
It's about building parallel institutions, too. He talks about the Red Pill community not as some toxic internet corner, but as an actual survival mechanism.
He describes men building man camps, moving off grid, and homeschooling their sons to protect them from the exact ideological indoctrination we talked about earlier. It's about creating spaces where men can be men without constantly apologizing for it. It's about building a lifeboat while the cultural ship goes down.
His final message is pretty bold. The future is male.
But there is a very strict condition attached to that. The future is male only if men refuse to apologize for their nature, if they stop accepting the premise that they are just defective women.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this as we wrap up. This isn't a light read. This is essentially a manual for a culture war.
It is. It's a weapon of logic and data, as Riker puts it. He's handing this to men who want to understand the true history of how these institutions, from the elementary schools to the highest courts, were captured by this Marxist ideology.
And it leaves you with a really provocative thought to mull over. If the system is rigged to punish your strength and your competence, if being a proud father who protects his family is literally flagged as toxic by Google, are you going to keep playing by their rules? Or are you going to build your own?
That is the question every listener needs to ask themselves today.
Yeah.
Are you a compliant participant, or are you building the resistance?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look, if you want to go deeper into this, you need to follow the author. You can find him at Conrad and Riker on Substack and Twitter. He is putting out uncensored truth there constantly.
And definitely get the book. You need the citations.
Yes, I am going to say it again because it is that important. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now. Buy Deconstructing Woke Brain Rot. It's the only way to get the full picture, all the data, and all the stories we couldn't fit into this deep dive.
It's highly worth the read.
And please, if you value this kind of deep dive, hit that like button and subscribe to our show. We want to keep bringing you this kind of hard-hitting content, and we need your support to beat the algorithm. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay sharp.
Stay sharp.